I'm gonna set this to live stream to my personal YouTube account, and then I will um, um, grab the huh? Uh, with what Zoom link? He's doing Zoom, and that's what I'm trying to do is live stream it, and I can't get logged into Facebook here. Can you log into Facebook here? Do you know your password? Anyway, we're going to do it this way. Um, it's going to live stream to a YouTube feed, which I'll post the stream for YouTube to Facebook. Okay. Um, let me. Um, it's that because I have a mic on it? Yeah. What mic? No, I don't. It must be. Um, yeah, I didn't mean to. Too many things going on right this second. Okay. Yeah. Are these the mics for the? These are the microphones over here. So we want to do. Let's try and represent it. Oh yeah.
Testing 1 2. Now we just gotta make sure it's going through the Zoom actually. Testing 1 2.
Where do you see it on here?
Well, you should be going to the Zoom on your phone.
Yeah.
Make sure it's coming through.
I got it.
To be able to.
Let me let you try to do that because I'm just flustered right now. I'm losing it.
Okay.
And I've got an active share for for YouTube on here. I copied it, so I did a Control C. If you can paste it in to something, or I know what I was going to do. I was going to send it to myself.
Where's my cameras? I was getting my cameras back up here. That would be this right here. Start video. Okay, that's my cameras. You want to log into Zoom on your phone?
Yeah.
Just make sure that we're getting. So when people look at it, we're actually getting the microphones. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, no, I don't, I can't help. I'm totally proud. Hey, excuse me. I've turned it back to Nakia.
All right. So are we live streaming it all then?
So he's still going to be live streaming through YouTube
Oh,
at the
okay.
moment.
All right.
So it will be live streamed from here to YouTube. He's got a link set up. We're just trying to make sure the mics are working real quick.
Okay. It's just he's feeling very stressed.
Yeah, yeah,
Who remembers their Facebook password? I just log in automatically.
yeah. Testing 1 2.
Help yourself to coffee or anything you like.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I'm going to slip by you guys. Sorry about that.
I packed a lunch though.
So I was going to add the YouTube link out to Facebook, so you can put this clip on the YouTube.
So, folks, we're about ready to begin. So, if you could fill your plate with the sweets and treats, and then we'll find a seat, and then we'll get started. You know, if one mic's path is good, two are better. I'm going to try that one more time to see if we get the feedback again. So we're actually getting it 3 times, right?
He is trying to figure out where the second feed is coming from. Let's try it one more time. Does this repeat? You figured it out? You got it? Oh. Yeah. So, but I'm just wanting to know because Bakhtash and I are going to use the microphone, so we want this not to be duplicating. Okay.
Well, we're gonna try it, okay, and we'll see if we get any feedback. Hi, everybody. Welcome on this. It was a dark and stormy night. My name is Michael Spath, and I'm the executive director of the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace. We're a voice of conscience for peace, justice, human rights, and intercultural encounter. It's important as we gather tonight to acknowledge that we do so on the traditional land of the Miami, Potawatomi, Shawnee, and Delaware tribes. And we pray that what happens here this evening will honor them and those present among us today. We like to take a moment every time we gather to focus on our peace wheel. And one of the words on our peace wheel tonight, let's focus on the word justice. And the words that are associated with the word justice, I'll just read from Martin Luther King Jr. These are revolutionary times. Out of the wounds of a frail world, new systems of justice and equality are being born. Every step toward justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concerns of dedicated individuals. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. So let's take a moment to ponder those words of King and how we can be justice advocates in our lives. We always like to say thanks to the people and pastors of Plymouth Congregational Church, United Church of Christ. One of the covenants of Plymouth Church is a just peace church. And Plymouth Church has been a partner with Indiana Center for Middle East Peace for all 18 years of our existence. And so we value very much the partnership of Plymouth Church. And so we want to again say tonight, thank you to Plymouth Church. Jim and Marion and Friends of the Third World have their wares for us again tonight to peruse and hopefully purchase. Jim reminded me that they've supported Terry's work with Friends of Afghanistan as well as the refugee community here in Fort Wayne for many, many years. So take a peek at the Friends of the Third World booth over there before you leave tonight. And just quickly, I'll call your attention to the flyer on your tables just with upcoming programs. Next month, a month from tonight, we're really excited to have Dr. Shauki Harb coming to us. He's written a new book. It's hot off the presses in the last year, A Surgeon Under Israeli Occupation. And Dr. Harb, by the way, is a close cousin of Eleanor Marine here in Fort Wayne. Eleanor's maiden name is Eleanor Harb Marine. And so we're excited to host Shauki here. One of his distinctive parts of his resume is that he worked with Michael DeBakey at Houston Methodist right after Michael DeBakey did the first heart transplant. Edward Curtis is a professor at IUPUI, and he's doing a whole series on the Arabs of Indiana. He's just finished a book and a documentary about Arabs of Indianapolis, and in the fall, he'll be working on Arabs of Northeast Indiana. Anyway, he'll be here. It'll be during the day. Notice that it's during the day on Tuesday, March 28th, and we'll be showing his film, Arabs of Indianapolis, and then have time for a conversation with Edward. And that'll be meeting, that group will be meeting at Amistad Christiana off of Capitol and Anthony in southeast Fort Wayne. Then finally, our own Sam Jarjor, a local attorney and a member of the Indiana Center Board, will be talking about Israel as an apartheid regime. We know, right, that Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and a number of Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem and Yesh Din. In fact, we'll be meeting with B'Tselem on my trip in June. We'll be meeting with the executive director of B'Tselem, Haggai Elad. It's a Jewish Israeli human rights organization, and a number of human rights organizations around the world now have begun to call Israel an apartheid regime. Sam will talk about what that means in terms of international law and human rights law. So that's what's coming up in the next couple of months, so we hope you'll be able to join us. Put these dates on your calendar, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for them. You know, Terry Doherty has given his life. He's given his life to the people of Afghanistan and to especially girls' education, but really to the people of Afghanistan. He's been involved in so many initiatives, the School of Leadership in Afghanistan, now in Rwanda in exile, as well as exchange students. Again, words fail as I try to describe how much Terry has done with and for the people of Afghanistan, refugees, and students in our country. So we're delighted to invite Terry to come forward and introduce one of his dear friends, Bakhta Shahadi. So Terry, take it away.
Isn't technology great? Hopefully we're live streaming. I had a few people ask to how they could get live streamed. And we had a few false starts, but we'll get there. Let me just describe for a second how the program will go tonight. Bakhtash and I will have a dialogue up here, And we'll share some of Bakhtash's work shortly. He's a videographer that has done many great documentaries. And we'll share some of those. We'll talk a bit about how Bakhtash got interested in the work that he's doing. And then we'll show a film about welcoming your new neighbors. And those new neighbors were Bakhtash's family. 35 years ago? And so he's personally experienced the new neighbor activity in the United States in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and grew up there. He was 3, I think, and when his family arrived, and went on after the university to become a Peace Corps volunteer. So we got to know Bakhtash at the Afghan embassy at a family or a Peace Corps reunion that the ambassador from Afghanistan invited friends of Afghanistan to come to the embassy. So Bakhtash and his family were there. Just to tell you that this connection goes back, I think, to 2016 between Bakhtash and I. And also, I'd like to take a minute to introduce every one of you because you're all such good friends. But I'm going to take a second to introduce a couple of friends. Tony and Nikki Agnello. And Tony and I were in Peace Corps in Afghanistan at the same time 50 years ago. And Tony and I have been partners in many projects, including bringing exchange students, him to Buffalo and area, and me in Fort Wayne. But beyond that, we grew to love the country over the years, the 2 years that I spent there, and Tony spent a bit more time because he stayed and worked with American students at the American International School. But 2 other special friends, and thanks to Joe Darvish for bringing Salih May Mazari and Halima. Halima is a medical doctor, and Salih May was a governor of a province in Afghanistan, or a district in Balkh province near Mazar-i-Sharif. And they and their families are living in Fort Wayne. So welcome. Thank you for coming. But you're among friends here. And many of you are also working with Afghan families, and that's what we're here to talk about and share about tonight, is how can we identify what's the right thing to be doing, how can we be doing what should be done in welcoming these Afghan families that arrived over the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. So with that said, Bakhtash, I want to bring you up, and got your mic on. We're going to just kind of stand up here and talk for the next 20 minutes or so and share a couple of the video clips from Retrograde, which is currently streaming, and you can watch it at home. It's an hour and a half, about the withdrawal of U.S. military from Afghanistan and the Afghan military and what their situation was. And Bakhtash was the executive producer for that. And another video that we'll share, and I'll let Bakhtash introduce these when it comes time to share them, Frame by Frame, which was a film that dealt with what Afghanistan was like the last time the Taliban had control of the country. And Bakhtash was involved in doing the translation on that film. But beyond that, Bakhtash being a friend, he's a Peace Corps volunteer, he was a refugee, he went on to serve as an interpreter for 3 years for U.S. military. He served as the primary instructor and course administrator for what's it called, Bakhtash? The State Department.
The Afghan Familiarization Course.
Yeah, for the State Department, deployment to Afghanistan went through Bakhtash's class, and I got to visit that one time. So Bakhtash is an educator, communicator, a person who I love dearly, and welcome. So, Bakhtash, you got your mic on.
Yep.
If you would, share with us a bit about your work and why you do it, and
Sure.
where it comes from. And,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Terry. It's a delight to be here. Everybody, welcome. It's such a pleasure to see all of your faces. It's always a delight when people ask me to come speak. It's such an interesting thing. And maybe it'll be useful to share that when I was a kid, I was deeply shy. I was shy. In fact, I was so shy that I used to hide behind my mother in the midst of people. And that didn't go away for a very long time. That didn't go away until I was about 11 years old. I didn't speak at all. Okay? And why is this an interesting thing? Well, now I go around the United States and I get asked to speak to many people. And so what's also really beautiful about the world is the ability to surprise yourself. When I was a kid, my family, we're from Afghanistan. My father's from Kandahar, my mother's from Kabul. And my father fell in love with America because he was taught by a Peace Corps volunteer in the 1960s. That volunteer's name was Eric. Just around the time that Tony and Terry served in Afghanistan. And so my father fell in love with the idea of America before he even came here. So then my father went to Kabul and got a job with USAID on their first demographic study of the country, which is still being used today at the State Department. Funny enough. It's really hard to do surveys in Afghanistan. Okay? So, my father decided he had to leave Afghanistan one day because my father was outspoken against the Soviet-backed Afghan government in the early 80s. And so my father knew that he was going to, quote-unquote, disappear. So he told my mother, pack your bags, we have to leave tomorrow. And that's how things work with Afghans. There's no planning, it just happens. Some of you may have experienced this with families that you deal with. Things just happen. So my mother prepared me and my younger brother, got into a taxi like my father asked, and she met him outside of Kabul. My father had ties with the Mujahideen, and they got on horseback 7 days and 6 nights and rode through the Hindu Kush to eventually get to Peshawar. This was the first time that my mother not only left Kabul, but left her neighborhood. Left her neighborhood. And so my parents and my brother and I were in Peshawar, in the refugee camps there for a little bit. Eventually, they had the wherewithal to move to Islamabad. And there, my parents were trying to figure out what to do with their lives. The war was going on in Afghanistan, and they didn't know what to do. So my father went to the consular office at the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad with the English that he had learned from Americans in Kandahar and Kabul, asked what the process was like to get an asylum, to come to America. And so my father had a letter of recommendation from Dr. Kerr, who ran the demographic study at USAID, who both Tony and Terry know. Small world. My father showed this letter to the consular officer. And what's really interesting is that it's a small world. In fact, it's a very small Afghan world. This consular officer knew Dr. Kerr, called him and said, "Hey, is this gentleman telling the truth?" And Dr. Kerr said, "Yes, he is." So we got a visa to come to America through a church that sponsored my family. And that church was St. Paul's Lutheran Church that's in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And that's where we were brought, and that's where my parents still are. Let me tell you a funny story about Carlisle, because it may even happen here in Fort Wayne. So I said that my father's from Kandahar, and in Kandahar, it's a relatively conservative part of Afghanistan. And my father knew a little bit of English, and we were riding around. This is my father's story now. We were riding around with one of our sponsors named George Marovich. And my father said, "George, I have a question for you." "Sure, Basir, what would you like to know?" My dad said, "Who are these people riding around on these buggies. Who are these people? And George said, "Oh, you mean these people with the horses and the buggies?" My dad said, "Yeah, who are these people? Tell me about these people." And what's interesting is George said, these people are known as the Amish. They're part of America. They're Americans. And my dad could not believe it. My father could not believe it. Why? Because my father came from Kandahar, where people wear black clothes and have big black beards. In fact, my father thought God was playing a sick joke on him. How is this possible? So we were raised in central Pennsylvania before there were other Afghans and other Muslims, and even before basmati rice arrived to central Pennsylvania. We were there. And so a lot of the work that I do comes from trying to find a sense of home and belonging, trying to find connections with people that are perceived not to have anything in common with us. This was the environment that I was raised in. And I started telling you that when I was a kid, I was very shy. And I was very shy because when I was a young boy, I was seen as the other. I was bullied and beat up all the time. And that stayed for a very long time. In fact, it's a catalyst for a lot of the work that I do. My parents thought they did us a very good service to take us out of conflict. And they thought that we were going to be okay in America. And they were right to a degree. What they didn't anticipate is us being harassed in those ways. Right? They didn't anticipate any of that. They thought that since they took us out of the war, that we were going to be okay in America, that we were going to be okay in the schools and communities of America. And we became okay eventually. At first, it was very difficult. And I share this with you because maybe this is what some of you are dealing with your Afghan families. How do I deal with these children? How do I deal with these parents? What's going on? How do I have better conversations with them? Okay? So I share this with you because it'll give us context for our conversations for the rest of the evening. Is that helpful?
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And as we go into just a bit more of Bakhtash's background, he's put together his own company called Talim, which again means education, curiosity, desire to learn. So Talim is a project of Bakhtash's that includes many projects. So he's writing his memoirs. He's had a podcast of more than 70 interviews with stories of transformation. You can find it on his website, bakhtashahadi.org, and listen to his podcast. It's awesome. 70 people who have been transformed in their life as refugees in various nationalities, various countries, various circumstances. But Talim is focused on telling stories that matter. And as Bakhtash describes it on his website, what does that mean? And he says, how do we want to be in relationship with each other? It's a question he's asking. And so Bakhtash, I'd ask you to share why that question.
Yeah.
What is it you're driving at there in your production work and in what we want to do?
Yeah. It's a lovely question. Thank you. So I'm very interested in the relationship between things, right? And I would ask all of you, if you had to answer this question, what would you say is the most important relationship in your life? It's a very important question. And if I ask you that question specifically, what would you say? Is it the one with your children? Is it the one with your parents? Is it the one with your faith? Is it the one with your dog? What is the most important relationship in your life? And I'll give you an answer that maybe you haven't thought about before. I would argue it's actually with yourself. It's actually with yourself. And so I think the purpose of human life in many ways is to become better, to become a better version of ourselves. And I think that's what it means to self-actualize, is to be in the pursuit of that. And so once we're on that path, I think, then we can ask the question, if this is on the path that I'm on, in terms of my relationship with myself, what does that mean for my other relationships? How will that dictate how I'll be with my friends, with my mother, with my father, with my son, my daughter, my friends, and those that I may not even know? Because if I may say, everything that we do in our lives is actually for us. That's not being selfish. That's being intentional. I came here because I have good friends, but I came here so I could be better, so I could learn about all of you, so I could see a slice of America that I haven't seen before. And as I'm in the pursuit of this, I hope to elevate others along the way by asking the right questions, by being curious to learn about you, but also to expand my wherewithal about the world. What don't I know? What sort of imagination can I step into that I wasn't aware of before? You see how it's actually serving me as I'm serving you? So in that way, everything is a relationship, right? When you feed your child, you want them to grow, but you're also doing it because you want to be a good parent for you. So you have a good relationship with yourself. So you can see yourself as a good mother. So you can see yourself as a good father. Because if you don't like yourself, then you're in a bad place. Then you're in a bad place. You'll hurt others and you'll hurt yourself. And that is the last thing that we want. And so if you are whole, if you've thought about your life and you've thought about the things that matter to you, then you're in a place to elevate others. And that's what I truly believe. And so that's why I do what I do. Is that helpful?
Help me.
Yeah.
I'll just quickly ask the next two questions that you ask of yourself, really, on the website.
Sure.
In describing his work with Talim, is what do we want to do to be for each other and for ourselves? So after asking that first question of who's important and what do I want to be, what about the for each other part of that?
Yeah.
And then finally, what is required of me to be a good neighbor? And that's a third question. So, and all of this under the heading of curiosity.
Absolutely.
And learning and education. So
once we start to think about who we are and the ways that we want to be better, so if you think about the type of person that you want to be, and that's up here, and then you think about where you are, all of a sudden there's a distance. That means we all have work to do, don't we? Even at this age of us being a little more mature, right? Because what I would argue at this mature age that a lot of people in this room are in, or at, there's a lot of work that you probably haven't done for a very long time. Conversations that you may not have had all these years. Things that you've been running away from for a very long time. Well, you know what's wonderful about being in this place? You still have the opportunity to become the type of person that you want to be. I'm still not there. My sense is most of us aren't. But the fact that you're on the pursuit of that is what matters most. That's what matters most. Right? Even if we say this to our children, don't we? Sweetheart, it's not important that you win the game. What's important is that you try. Don't we say that to our kids? It's not important that you get the top grade in the class. It's that you actually applied yourself. And what's beautiful, actually turn that back onto ourselves. And the most difficult work in our lives is actually to look in the mirror and to say, how am I still disappointing myself to this day? And how will I overcome that? And so once we start to do that type of work, then we can say, what will I be for you then? How will I be in service to you in this relationship? Whether it's your wife, your husband, your child, your brother, or your sister that you haven't spoken to in many years. Because she didn't come to your wedding because she didn't like your ex-husband. This happens. This is life. So what will we do in these moments? And that's what it means to ask the question, what will we be for each other? How will we be in service of others as we're in service to each other? Right, so Terry spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. And if I asked him what is one of the things that he loves about Afghanistan, my sense is he'll probably say the hospitality of the people there.
Absolutely, yeah. And
what I would say is, what does it mean to be a good host? To a relationship, to yourself, and to others. Because if you can answer that question, then you're in a place to actually elevate yourself and others around you. What does it mean to be a good host? I would argue it's about being in service to others, asking questions that are open-ended, that aren't about being judgmental, and actually listening to the response. Silence, too, is a response. And so, being aware of these things is something that we can all improve on, to include me. And so, the last question was about what does that require of us now? Right? So all of us here are in Fort Wayne. What a beautiful little slice of America. And some of you have probably been here for a very long time. Maybe generationally you've been here. God bless you, what an amazing thing. And then some of you are brand new here. Welcome, Khosh Ramadan. And so, what's interesting is, we have all these people here now. The question that I ask of all of you is, what will you do with this opportunity? How will you be a host? And how will you be a new American? These are the questions that we should be asking of ourselves. And when we ask that type of question, then all of a sudden, you'd be surprised how you will come together. Right? Instead of saying, what was it like to be there and why are you here? Of all the places, why are you here? That seems like a more of a judgmental question for me. Maybe a more open-ended question is, how do you like to be in Fort Wayne now? What is it like for you to be in Fort Wayne? Do you have other family that live in other parts of America? How is it different? And all of a sudden you're in a conversation about learning versus judging. Right? Because we're not going anywhere. Are we? Great. We're not going anywhere. My parents are still in Pennsylvania. My parents are still in Carlisle. I live 2 hours away from Carlisle because of the way that community embraced us. Right? Let me give you an example of how the community of Carlisle tried to be friends with us, and I'll tell you the story. So, in the 1980s, there was not a Google or a Facebook or a computer in every home. Do you all remember the Encyclopedia Britannica? Do you remember that? The Encyclopedia Britannica? Yep. Exactly. So if you wanted to learn about something, you would have to go to the library, you'd have to go in, you have to find the Encyclopedia Britannica, you have to look up the thing that you want to look up. And if you looked up the section on Afghanistan, it was one paragraph. And that paragraph was about the Mujahideen and how they're fighting America's war in Afghanistan. Right? There was nothing about culture. There was nothing about history. There was nothing. So, these 9 families that sponsored my family at St. Paul's Lutheran Church wanted to host my family, and so they took turns. They took turns, right, hosting us. One family was responsible for helping my mother learn how to drive. One family was responsible for helping my dad pay taxes. My dad didn't know what taxes were. One family was responsible for helping my parents learn English, right? All these things. And then, so these families would also invite us over for dinner. For dinner. And so the one family that invited us first were known as the Millers, John and Emily Miller. They invited my family over. So we went, and they made some lasagna for us. Lasagna. And you know, my parents were looking at it. My father tried it. My mother smelled it. And my father just pushed it around his plate. And my father's very polite, and he would smile. You know, John and Emily were asking, how is it? He would say, it's very good. But they didn't notice that he wasn't putting it in his mouth. And then my mother would say to my father, which means, please tell them that I'm sick. It's that time of the month. Right? And so the John and Emily would say, why isn't she eating? Oh, she's sick. And they would, oh, okay, fine. So my mother would pretend like she was busy with us, the kids, and we weren't touching it. The next week, we went over to the Maroviches, and they made us lasagna. Same thing happened. My father's pushing it around. My mother, I'm telling him I'm sick. The whole thing. Week after week after week, 7 weeks in a row, we were given lasagna. And later on, my father gained the courage and the English language to eventually ask George Marovich and Emily Thuma and all these folks, I have to ask you, why is it that you all made lasagna for us? Why did you do that? Of all the foods in America, that food. And you know what they said? They said, Basir, you all look Sicilian. You all look Italian. So we made you lasagna. And you told us you liked it. So we continued to make it for you. And so in the Encyclopedia Britannica, there was no information about the cuisine of Afghanistan. Right? We actually didn't eat cheese for a very long time. It's not what you do in Afghanistan. Right? We push it away, and they weren't paying attention. They weren't watching us. They were listening to my father, but my father's polite. But they weren't watching us. You see? Their intention was positive, but they missed the mark. They should have had a conversation. Basir, Marzia, what is food like in Afghanistan? What is it that you eat there on a daily basis? How do you make it? What is it called? Simple yet basic questions. And can I tell you what most refugees miss when they come to America? They miss their families, they miss their community, but the thing that we miss most is our food. And you all know this feeling. If anybody's ever spent some time abroad, if you spent some time in Thailand, or Ecuador, or Peru, or Ukraine, what do you miss most? Pizza, spaghetti, potatoes, cheese. These things that resemble a feeling of warmth in your home. Right? The little things. And so you all know this, but it's a wonderful reminder to say, let's have a conversation about what these people actually want versus what they're telling me they want. Because they want to make me happy. Okay? So I'm going to pause there to see where Terry wants to go next.
Okay. I've asked Bakhtash to share some of his work is in the form of video documentary work.
Sure.
And Bakhtash will introduce each of two short trailers,
Sure.
2-minute trailers from a couple of his projects.
Yep.
And then we'll take a break and we can try some of the Afghan naan and rot and get a cup of tea with it.
Yep.
Tea's the best thing to go with rot, okay? And some nuts and fruit. All of those things are typically set out for guests in an Afghan home. And but enjoy those when we take a break. But
Sure.
Bakhtash, of your film projects,
Sure.
we talked about you sharing a couple of them.
Sure.
And one of your earliest projects was Frame by Frame,
Yep.
that you were involved in translating, and it came to you late or early in your film work. So
Yeah.
if you describe that.
Sure. So thank you for that, Terry. I didn't study film in school. I didn't study storytelling in school. I studied sociology and anthropology. Why? 1 week after I went to college, 9/11 happened, and the world changed. And so I became very obsessed at that point with the power of belief. The power of belief because the Al-Qaeda terrorists that attacked America believed in a certain thing. Okay? So I became obsessed with belief and the power of belief. So when I finished college, I did something that I knew would serve, I think, others in an interesting way. I joined the Peace Corps because my family was inspired to come to America to service of the Peace Corps. So I got to live in Mozambique to be an English teacher for 2.5 years. What a fascinating country. And when people ask me what that experience was like, as I tell them it was the best education of my life. Why? I didn't have running water, so I had to fetch my water every single day. So now when I turn on the faucet and wash my face, I think to myself, thank God I don't have to fetch water today, to this day. I also didn't have electricity. So I'm blessed when I find a charger, even at Terry's house, which is where I'm staying. And then lastly, I got malaria 2 times. So it taught me how fragile our health is and how the community there helped me before anybody else. Right? So lessons of life is what Mozambique taught me. So then afterwards, I went and I served in Afghanistan as a combat interpreter for 3 years with the Marines. And I learned what war brings out in us. Okay? And so after that experience, I came back to America, and through the networks of Washington, D.C., which is where I live, a friend said, hey, listen, 2 filmmakers reached out to me and they want a film translated. I can't do it. Are you interested? And I said, sure, let's see what they got. These filmmakers then emailed me footage that they had, and I was captivated. Their names were Mo Scarpelli and Alexandria Bombach. And I said, listen, I'd be delighted to translate your film. And they said, how much do you cost? And I said, I'll do this for really cheap. I told them $2,000. Man, I made a mistake. I'm teasing, it was some of the best work of my life. So they brought me out to Portland, Oregon. We spent the next 2 months translating this film. And I learned the process of editing and filmmaking and the power of footage, music, and language all combined. And when we went live and premiered with our film at South by Southwest in 2015, I learned the power of story then. Because I traveled across the United States with that film, and instead of watching the film in theaters, I would go into the theater and watch the audience's reaction to the film. And I would see people transformed in the course of an hour and a half towards Afghans, a country that they'd never even been to before. And that's where I found myself deeply transformed by the power of story and filmmaking in particular. And so I think maybe now what we could do is watch a little trailer to give you an idea of what that film is about. Really quickly, it's about 4 photojournalists that put their lives at risk to capture the truth in Afghanistan, I think in 2011 and 12, which is when I was there. So maybe Nakia, could you please play that clip? Yep. Good.
This is Afghanistan. Before the Taliban, you can't believe it that this was Afghanistan.
عکس جز زندگی آدم‌ها است. طالبان متاسفانه کارکاسون هم داشته نشد. مملکتی که بدون عکس باشه مملکت هویتش نداره. This free situation for media is really new in Afghanistan.
We were the first group who got trained in photography after the Taliban time.
Those 10 years was a revolution for photography. But I don't know what will happen after.
چیزی از غیر کافی رو نمیدونم یه چیز واقعی هست
It was not just, okay, I won the Pulitzer Prize and then finished. No, I had to tell this story.
What I'm trying to do is focus deeper on the life of Afghan women. Sometimes I get to the point that I even question this decision. If I die, is it worth it?
اینا حق دارن مثل از این که ما خودت با تفنگ خود از میهن دفاع میکنیم فوتوژورنالیست ها کندهشون هست
sometimes you have something and you want to shout and you can't, and there's no one to hear you. I want to use photography in a way to not be voiceless again.
So Bakhtash, reflecting on this particular project, where did that take you? And what came next in your path of learning,
Yeah.
Talim?
Yeah, so that film really opened my eyes in terms of the power of storytelling. So I was a translator, associate producer, and film ambassador with Frame by Frame. And it made me really curious about being involved in the art of storytelling and the power of communication. And so it led me to a couple of other films related to Afghanistan. There's one called Afghanistan by Choice, which is acquired by the New York Times. There's another film called Muslims in Trump's America, which I was a participant in and subject in, which won a Peabody. And then my most recent film is called Retrograde, where I'm the executive producer. And there were a number of amazing filmmakers that came together to make this film. In fact, those that work in storytelling and filmmaking, it always takes a tribe to make a film. It's not one person. So this film, Retrograde, is about the United States' last 9 months in Afghanistan. So I got involved in the film when Biden announced the withdrawal of U.S. troops in Afghanistan in May of 2021. Because prior to that, National Geographic, who commissioned this film, wanted to make a film about the U.S. Green Berets and what war meant to these families, to these soldiers. And then once Biden announced the withdrawal, the scope changed from a film about the Green Berets to a film about the Afghan military. And so that's when the National Geographic team and Matt Heineman and his team reached out to me to say, listen, we'd love for you to come on board and help us better understand this film, actually. And so what we didn't anticipate as we were working on Sami Sadat and others that were part of this film, the subjects of this film, is the eventual collapse of Kabul and the entire country. And what was astonishing was, as we were trying to get our cameramen into Kabul during that horrendous time when people were scared for their lives and trying to get on planes to leave, National Geographic was asking me to help get these cameramen in when I was fighting to get my family out. It's an astonishing place for many people to be at that time. And many people in this room are probably trying to get people out that they knew through any means possible. Private charter planes, military contacts, convoys, you name it. Because people were deathly scared that when the Taliban came into Kabul, that they were going to murder and kill anybody who was pro-America or had worked with Americans. So, that film is about the end of a chapter for America. But what I also want you all to think, I want to show the trailer, but what I want you to think about is, even though the war may be over for America as a country, the war is still going on for many people. And let me share how. For refugees that are here, now, new to America, they are fighting a war of survival every single day in their minds. How will I get through this life? How will I find my family? How will I be reunited with my parents, my brothers, and my sisters, or even my own children one day? The arts and there's something right now known as family reunification that's happening, where there's some family members in Mexico or Germany or even Fort Wayne, and they're trying to come together because through that chaos, people are trying to get on planes just to leave by any means necessary, to include infants. I'm sure you've seen photos of infants being given to U.S. soldiers. Take my child, get it far away from here. Can you imagine being in that place where you think that's a good idea? Where the opposite is, if I don't let my child go, it will die, she or he will die, I will die. And so, these people are dealing with war actually every single day in their minds. Who else is dealing with a lot of struggle? American veterans. We've been going on, the United States went into Afghanistan right after 9/11. It was there until the very end, until August of 2021. I want to ask you, how many veterans do you think served in Afghanistan over the course of 20 years? Somewhere up in the millions, maybe 1 million. There are 3 million enlisted people in the United States, enlisted service members. I would say 1 million members probably served in Afghanistan. 1 million. The question that I have to ask for all of them is, who did you lose in that war? What did you lose in that war? And how difficult is it for you to be back now, knowing that the thing that you are fighting against is back in power? Was all this done in vain? In addition to the PTSD that you may be dealing with, are you also dealing with moral injury? Another group that's dealing with a lot of PTSD and moral injury is Afghan veterans that served alongside American veterans in Afghanistan that are here. They too are suffering. The war continues for them. And so part of the work that I want to do with Retrograde is, I hope the film acts as a catalyst for a national conversation about what we will do with these people that gave so much to this war. Because if we don't, then I think the suicide rates for veterans will continue to go up. Right now it's about 20 a day. 20 veterans a day commit suicide. And we're not having a national conversation about this. How many of you know somebody that served in Afghanistan? Probably a lot of you. Probably a lot of you. Okay? And so this war is actually more important than I think we can possibly begin to imagine. Even though it may not be on the news, it's still in the forefront of many people's minds. And so maybe what we could do is, Nakia, maybe we could show the trailer for Retrograde. If you'd like to watch it, it's streaming right now on Hulu and Disney+. For those that have watched it, God bless you and thank you. We're also screening it, I think, in Muncie tomorrow.
Yes, Bakhtash is going to Muncie and will be streaming Retrograde in its full length. If anybody wants to go to that, it'll be at 7 p.m. in Muncie at Ball State. And after this trailer, we'll take just a couple-minute break. Just keep it short, but go over and get some refreshment. This is a good Afghan thing to do. Get some tea, get some nuts, some fruit, some naan, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about Bakhtash's personal family experience and what it's meant to him and his family as refugees in the United States, and now as people supporting Afghans who are arriving as refugees and are still living with the war that they've left behind. So if you would, Nakia, run the...
It's strange and confusing time right now. The Americans trained me, and after being committed for so many years, I just don't believe that the Americans are going to retrograde and leave the country. Our country is everything we have. Since the US left, I can see the sense of abandonment within the Afghan forces. I want to live long enough to see peace in our country, spend time with my family, grow old in Afghanistan, and ultimately die in Afghanistan.
So it's coming to theaters November 11, but it's streaming now? Or,
It's already in theaters,
okay.
and it's streaming now. And it's maybe share that the film was shortlisted for an Oscar. So the film's done really well in the world, and so we hope it continues the conversation about the realities for many people that have served in Afghanistan.
So let's take a quick break. Let's get back to the next section by 7:35 here. And just get yourself some tea and crumpets. No. Yeah. And I want to just mention, I think, Tony, as you're bringing your naan and rot back, Tony here brought the naan and rot, and there's some little almonds that are sugar coated that are wonderful with tea. You just kind of suck on them. Yeah, there you go. There's a Afghan bakery in Buffalo that Tony bought several loaves of naan. So I hope you're enjoying it. And all right.
السلام عليكم چطوری؟ ساعتان خوب؟ جان مانجور؟ خیرتی؟
خوشحال میشم یک نفر فارسی من خود انگلیسیش نمیفهم.
حسان گپ میزن بخیر. صحیح؟
Okay. All right. Nakia, if you would, we'll start the
this
next.
is 15 minutes.
Okay, let's give it an intro.
Okay,
Yeah. Wait, Nakia. Oh,
sure.
okay. Some decaffeinated, but Dave just arrived. And let's let Bakhtash just introduce this.
Sure.
And then Nakia will show it. Okay.
Great. So as everybody's chomping away at their delicious snacks and having their green tea or brown tea, or I think somebody even mentioned decaf coffee.
I bought some decaffeinated right over
Yeah.
there. We have some now, and I'm going back to get more tea. I see we
Right.
just used up our hot water.
And your name is Patty. Patty gets things done. Be nice to Patty. That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, good. So what we're going to do now is, as Terry mentioned, we'll take about 15 minutes to watch a little trailer for a film that I'd like to build out. But I think it gives you an idea of, well, let's watch it and see what it elicits from all of you. The subjects of the film are me and my parents and our family. Okay? And so the idea is, what has happened to Afghans generationally as we continue to lose our sense of home and belonging and have to rebuild elsewhere? Because this new group of Afghan refugees have come, but they're not the first. They're not the first. They're in fact 4 decades now deep into people coming to America and other countries around the world too, not just the United States. I have Afghan family members that are in Rio de Janeiro, Mexico City, Beijing, Prague, trying to start new semblances of home. So we'll just watch this, and then Terry and I will have a conversation about what this may mean for you and your community in Fort Wayne. Okay?
Pandemonium at Kabul airport today, as desperate people pour onto the runway trying to flee the country in what can only be described as a chaotic exodus. Well, the Taliban took over. First thought was, okay, we'll do that. I remember getting messages from my cousins and aunts and my uncles pleading for help. What I would like to talk to you about is your escape and your journey out of Afghanistan.
When we saw the airport, there was more than 10,000 people sitting on the road. My dad told me, you want to go in this situation? I said, yes, we have to go. I told him I don't want to live in this situation. I was so scared about my wife and my daughter, my little daughter. There were lots of people inside the airport, and when they were like out of patience, they pushed each other. 8 people were killed in front of our eyes. I saw kids being killed. I saw an old woman on a wheelchair who died. I saw a couple of other people just died in front of our eyes, and it was really heartbreaking.
سلام گرد جان. ولی افغانستان چطوره؟ خوب هستی؟
See? Not going. I'm sorry, brother. Ali, hello. Come on. Papá está atrás. El teléfono está ahí, está small. Also, she can speak now. He has a couple of nieces in Afghanistan and two sisters. They called my husband so many times. It came to the point he got depression. He was on the phone with one of his nieces and cry. She was telling him, I'm going to kill myself if I don't leave Afghanistan. What should I do? I'm like, what can I do? I called the boys. I said, what should I do? Your dad is just sleeping daytime and nighttime because he couldn't help his nieces. After so many months, God answered our prayer. The refugee came here and my husband involved with them. And when he involved to go help them out, he was feeling good.
He says he and his wife and kids still feel like passengers living out of a backpack.
I was born in Afghanistan in 1981, in the midst of the Afghan-Soviet War. In 1984, my father decided to leave Afghanistan and his life behind. He told my mother that we needed to leave because his life was in danger. We landed in Carlisle, Pennsylvania in January of 1986. From 5 years old to 18 years old, I remember wanting to be American more than ever. My parents represented everything that I didn't want to be. In kindergarten, first grade, I used to get beat up every single day. I remember feeling like I deserved it because I didn't look like anybody else. I didn't speak like anybody else. So I would never come home and tell my parents about it. Now that you're in Dallas, you're in Texas, you're there with your family, what is the strangest, weirdest part about being American?
So when we arrived in the United States, in Dallas, the next day I realized that I come to a totally different place. It was out of my imagination because I never traveled outside of Afghanistan, even outside of Kabul. I raised in only a small city in Kabul. I just saw inside the Kabul. And it was a different environment, different people.
Americans continue to flee those parts of our country after the September 11th terrorist attack. Many have suspicion on all people with no consent, thinking perhaps they all support terrorism. Our 43 State Army spoke with a local couple of born in Texas who said that's often true. Everyone feels that Afghans are helpful, not harmful. Quality question now. So last week I was afraid, and some people asked me, are you citizen? I said, yes, why are you asking this question? Another told Mark that they wouldn't fly on an airplane return. Hurtful. But environment hurts. I can go to the media and say them out. So I wanted to all you have anything for this not like that. In Carlisle, City Girl, Fox 43 did this one. My husband, he has a big mouth always. When he lived in Afghanistan, he talks a lot about the communists, and if he was not in Afghanistan, they would come. The communists would find him and kill him.
sister's father-in-law had a connection with freedom fighters. So he told us he can send Marcia with kids and his sister with her kids.
He said to me, Margie, you must go urgently to work. Do not let anybody know you're leaving Afghanistan. Tell your boss, I'm going to breastfeed my son, I'm going home. And I changed my clothes, the taxi came, and I sat in the taxi to leave Afghanistan. I did not say goodbye to none of my brother and sister. It was just my mom and dad and his mom and dad. And we left home. We left all of our stuff.
The time we're getting closer to the United States kind of appear. Because I only did nothing different right now. And Caroline, the principal, my God, even I couldn't pronounce it that because her name's a lady. It's Caroline.
Then Baptist was screaming from the plane, "Mom, look at the doggies, nice, look, look, they're in a plane." But the fear for me and my husband was taken. We were so scared. What should we do? Fight for them? Oh, look at the lights, Mom, look at the plane, look at the plane, what are we fun? When the church talked about it and said they were going to bring, you over here, we were so excited because we wanted to bring more. We wanted to bring as many people as we could. But our church got one family, so that was you all. What I remember is you getting off of wasn't exactly a bus, maybe a van or something, a big van. Was that the church? George's big van. Yeah, and got down off of the big steps that came down and just moving all around. Wow. All right. How are you? Good, good.
One thing we're told erroneously was that conflict level was not. Never had a war house, or really actually spy. Commander in Chief, I have determined that it is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan. These are the resources that we need to seize the initiative of building the Afghan capacity that can allow for a responsible transition of our forces out of Afghanistan.
1 month after Obama announced the surge, I was on a plane back to Afghanistan. First time since I was a child.
Both of us, please don't go. Dad said, don't go. Somebody will come and kill you. You're not going to go.
Interpreters, we would dress exactly like the Afghan crew. If there was any indication of your interpreter, we would get shot. First by the second. If you take the interpreter out, then all of a sudden these two forces can't speak with me. So bringing these two worlds together, the Afghan commandos, the U.S. Marines, we can navigate that war very sensitively.
Then when we went to Afghanistan, every night I said, so you didn't say anything. My son doesn't listen to me. You're the one. Your dad, he listens to you. What can you do? You need to bring my son. Then he said, okay, I have to go to Afghanistan to find him and bring him back.
It was like 17th of August that you contacted me. You said that I'm going to help you, and you just need me to send your information because you knew that I was working with Americans, and I was like, really, I was afraid by myself. I really did burn lots of my certificates, lots of my documents that I had, and I was like hiding at home.
When my husband and Karthus came home, they had depression, they had anxiety. I had a hard time when they were coming back home for 10 years. I had a hard time.
We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11th, 2001, and make sure Al Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. Our mission in Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building. It was never supposed to be creating a unified, centralized democracy. Our only vital national interest in Afghanistan remains today what it has always been: preventing a terrorist attack on American homeland.
Viewers report the number of people experiencing hunger, which is a step away from starvation, has nearly doubled after the takeover.
One bombing can make families feel like they have to choose between believing that their children will be safe and sending their children to get an education. Every time they're forced to make that choice, it undermines any hope for Afghanistan to have a peaceful and prosperous future.
So we'll gain it. And that comes to pay the price.
Right now I'm happy. I'm very happy. I'm working in Dallas Fort Worth International Airport, and I'm very happy.
How do you feel now that your mother and your father still at home?
What is it like to be heartbroken by Afghanistan and then now also heartbroken by America? It's hard.
Bakhtash, if it's okay with you, in the interest of time, I'd like to open it up for your questions, your thoughts, having seen this, and for Bakhtash to respond. I know many of you are helping Afghan families in Fort Wayne or have questions in your own minds about our departure from Afghanistan. And by the way, Bakhtash, this is one of 2 film projects he's working on, and film projects take money, and so he's looking for funding and fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is just the director's edits so far of a concept, and no place like home. So,
yeah.
Fair enough?
Absolutely.
Your thoughts, and I'll run to you with the mic if you have a question or a thought to share on this.
This is something that Bakhtash and I have been talking about. There's somebody in this room who is part of a network who can put Bakhtash in touch with the cinema industry. So think about that. And when Bakhtash goes back to DC, you can give the information to Terry, or you can give it directly to Bakhtash if there's time.
Thank you, sir.
And I will say that Bakhtash, part of his approach to making these movies and a living is speaking in engagements like this. So if you feel moved tonight to share something for Bakhtash, Indiana Center can make sure he gets it. But also, if you're in Rotary or in organizations like that, see if you can get him invited to a university like Ball State. One lady in Portland called Bakhtash out of the blue, and Portland, Indiana. And so we're going to Muncie tomorrow, and he'll be presenting to students there at Ball State, thanks to a professor that's encouraging the students for credit. So Anyway, thanks, Tony, for that. If you have ways and means of helping, assisting, or directing Bakhtash to funds and or opportunities to share, that's what this is about.
I was struck earlier by your comments about how Afghans love their food. And we are serving two families here in this church. And I'm involved with one. Linda over there is involved with the same family.
Yeah.
And where I am struggling a little bit, the food is a part of this. I want to respect the culture. I want to learn about it. I want to become educated. Engage in that kind of a relationship. And at the same time, it's pretty clear to us that they're not going back to Afghanistan anytime soon. So do we not have some obligation to get them acquainted so they can thrive in this culture and, for lack of a better term, make them more American?
Yeah.
Which would mean not the naan, but maybe McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I would be interested in your thoughts about how we address that transition or that dilemma.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question, Doug. My sense is other people are probably asking the same question too. What could be your role in this time for them? Well, what I would ask is, the question that you asked is, how do we help them become more American? I would ask now, what does it actually mean to be American? McDonald's is no longer just American. I was recently in Kuala Lumpur, there's a McDonald's there. I was in Tokyo, that's where all the dates happen. There's a McDonald's there. So I would ask you, what does it mean to be an American now? Sincere question. Sincere question. My sense is to be American is about believing in the ideals of this country. Not the things that we have, but the things that we believe. Right? Values, principles, morals. Americans believe in freedom. Freedom to choose. Right? Freedom to express our opinions. Freedom of religion. And so I offer this as a way of thinking about what does it mean to be American and what do you believe in? How do you hope to maybe offer that to them? Not through our words necessarily, but actually through exposure and them seeing us. Because who here in this room has tried to change somebody? Maybe you're married to that person and you haven't learned your lesson. It's very difficult to change somebody. So how do you do it? Instead of telling your children to do something, have them watch you do it. Right? My father would always say to me, son, you should read more books. And I said, Boba, why aren't you reading more books? And so I offer that to you as a way of thinking about how you want to be in relationship with them. Because my sense is we as Americans are very good at telling people what to do. We did that in Afghanistan. We tried to do that in Vietnam, maybe Iraq and other places that we go to. Well, we don't have to be those types of Americans. We can be the types of Americans that say, wait a second, Fatima, it's really curious how you make your rice. Can you teach me? And then tomorrow I'd like to teach you how I make my rice. And rice could be anything. Worship, education, even driving. Right? And so I offer this as not a way of saying what to do, but maybe having them model what you do after seeing it a few times. Right? And again, everybody knows this, but it's really important to think about it in those terms. Think about it in those terms. Was that sufficient? Did you ask another question? Please ask. But ask another question. That was lovely. Please ask some more. Please. That was good.
Just to follow on in a similar way, the family is Muslim. My wife and I go, when we go together, Muslima, the mother, comes out very friendly. Occasionally I go there myself. I never see her.
Yep.
And I'm I have a concern that she never leaves the house.
I understand.
And it's a very isolating existence.
I understand.
Mohammed, her husband, works at very hard physical labor. He brings home a paycheck. They're surviving okay, but she has virtually no social life. And how do I respect that? Is that something I can, quote, help with?
Great question. So, what's really, really beautiful about being in America are people are very free to do what they want. And people do things that make sense for them. And what I would kindly urge you to think about is, in terms of gender dynamics, we in America are very liberal as it pertains to gender dynamics. Male, female. We even have bathrooms now where both boys and girls go to the same bathroom. Have you seen these? Not just boys and girls, men and women. You've seen these? So we're very, very, very liberal in America. So what I would say in those instances is, if you feel that way, Doug, you feel like Fatima, or whatever her name was, I missed her name? Muslava. You feel that she's isolated, or you're noticing this, what I would say is, maybe it's not your responsibility to do anything about it, but instead maybe say to your wife or a female friend, hey, could you go talk to her? Because it will not make her comfortable if you went and approached her. It would make her husband very uncomfortable if you approached her. Right? So, same sex in Afghan culture is how things should be done. Same sex. Right? Even with American women that talk to Afghan, it's fine, but just not too much. Just not too much. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the right way. Because gender is a very, very specific type of sensitivity in Afghanistan. It's more specific, more sensitive than any other thing, than maybe religion. These two things I would be very, very, very sensitive about. Everything else you can kind of play around with, but those two things are very sensitive, especially the gender dynamic. So if you feel like she's being isolated, maybe ask your wife, could you go talk to her? And then say, are you happy? Are you happy alone? Would you like more friends? And she may say something like, well, I have to take care of the kids. Or if I go out, who's going to cook for my husband? She may say these things. Right? And then you can say, okay, instead of offering our judgment onto her, say, great, does it make you happy to be able to provide for your family that way? And she may say yes. Oh, wonderful. Would you like to see how I serve my family? And then just have her be exposed to it, to maybe just see it, to let her know there's other ways to do things too. Slowly but surely, this may lead to a change that she wants. Right? So, for example, let me tell you my parents' story, who you just saw, both my parents. My parents are lovely people and I love them very much. My dad's from Kandahar and they tend to be very conservative people. Very conservative people. And we came to central Pennsylvania and we had a problem because we didn't have that much money. And my dad said, oh God, both men and women have to work in America. We got to pay this thing called rent and taxes and insurance. Because my parents weren't interested in governmental support. They were interested in working. So my father said to my mom, we need to get you a job. And my mom was like, what do I do? I'm not educated, never finished high school. What do I do in America? Both my parents didn't finish high school. And my dad said, well, we need to learn some English. So, started learning English. And then my dad said, well, you know, what's something you can do with your hands? It can allow you to make money. My mom said, I don't know. And my dad said, what if you went into, cutting hair? In Afghan culture, that's not a positive thing. It's not perceived to be a positive thing because you'd have to cut men's hair. You'd have to touch men. And maybe it may sound ludicrous, but for my parents, it was a very foreign thing. Oh gosh, what do we do? And so my dad said, well, what we can do. It wasn't that my dad was uncomfortable. It's that my mom was uncomfortable doing it. It wasn't controlling her. My mom was uncomfortable with it. So what she did is when she eventually got her license and worked at the beauty salon, she told the owners of the beauty salon, I'd love to just work with women until I get more comfortable with men. She needed exposure. And my father was comfortable with it. But it was her that was very uncomfortable with it. So I would just urge you to think about, is it him or her that's uncomfortable with it? You see? My feeling is most people say, oh, the man is being controlling. Maybe it's not that. Right? So it's this idea of being curious. Help me understand what's going on. Would you like to work? What type of work would you like? Would you like to learn English? How would you like to learn English? Maybe it's not through reading and writing. Maybe it's through watching television. Maybe it's through speaking with friends. Right? Little things that I think we can reconsider different ways of doing things. You like to eat with your hands? Don't you want to? Oh no, it tastes better with my hands. Oh really? Maybe we can try. You see, little things. Little things. Great question, Doug. God bless you.
Anyone else with a question? Well, Baktash, one of the conversations we had and had to do with the idea of agency.
Yeah.
And in Afghanistan, things happen, inshallah. I'll see you tomorrow, inshallah.
Yeah.
I'll get better soon, inshallah, meaning God willing. And that approach to things versus the American approach to things. And as a Peace Corps volunteer, it was very frustrating, to go into a situation and say, I'm going to do this thing. And they say, what? So anyway, Baktash, take it from there on.
So let's talk about this idea of agency. Maybe I can ask all of you, when I say the word agency, what do you all think of as a matter of the human condition? What do you think of when I say agency? What is? Okay, so a place. So
People, yeah, place or people.
what is your name?
Victoria.
Victoria. What if I said to you, Victoria, and I asked you the question, do you have agency? How would you think of that word as it applies to you?
Someone would be my friends to get help from. Government offices and different types of things. If I'm looking for like Social Security help or things like that.
I see.
Medical help would be another agency.
Great. So maybe what's useful here in this moment is to maybe define what it means specifically to this piece. So agency is this idea of feeling like you have control over your life. Feeling like you have agency over your life. Okay? Why is this important? I think in the American sensibility, it's so common that we don't even think about it. We don't even think about it. It's so common. Okay? You tell your kids, sweetheart, if you work harder, you can get that grade. Sweetheart, if you work harder, you can get into that college. Sweetheart, if you work harder, you can get that promotion. The more you put in, the more you get out. Right? We believe in productivity in America. Look at this beautiful country. It's been created in 300 years because we believe in this. Right? We believe it. You go to New York City, it's an astonishing experience. Mostly because I'm like, how did this happen in such a short amount of time? That's really what I think when I go to New York City. Okay? So, what does this actually mean? In the context of Afghanistan, the idea of agency sometimes is foreign to people. Okay, now what does that mean specifically? In the context of Afghanistan, I think the ways in which religion has helped that country and the ways in which religion has allowed people to cope with the amount of loss in that country, they lean into religion in a very real way. Specifically, this idea of chance. Things happen by chance. We in America believe in choice, and sometimes in Afghanistan, people believe in chance. For example, let me give you a very specific example. My father hates wearing his seatbelt. You know the seatbelt? 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 I say, Baba, why don't you wear a seatbelt? He says, Bachim badamamya, which means I don't like it. Yo, tangas, which means it's tight. That's not the real reason. He believes that if he gets into an accident, what will happen will happen. He doesn't believe it will help him. What will happen will happen. Or sometimes my father won't stop fully at a red light. Been here for 35 years. Or my father speeds, and he sped so much sometimes in his car that the police took away his license because he got so many tickets. Why? Because he was always running late, because he didn't think about time in the same way as Americans did. Okay? Oh, I get to work when I get to work. Bubba, you will lose your job if you don't get there at 8 o'clock. Oh, it's okay. Dad. Right? And so I share this with you because it was very much part of my father's DNA and the way that he was raised. My mother came here at a very young age and she was like, uh-oh. My mother believes in agency very well, which is why she's the moneymaker of the family. She's the economic engine of the family. She's the one that put us through private school, actually. Okay, so my parents, in these one family, I see two different mentalities. Two different mentalities. Same family, same couple, and they love each other. My parents married for love, which is an interesting thing. Love is an interesting thing. In America, we fall in love and we decide to get married. In Afghanistan, people get arranged, then they learn to love the person they're with. That's why we have to say, they have a love marriage or they have an arranged marriage. Anyway, that's interesting. So, both parents, different mentalities. Different mentalities. So in the context of helping your Afghan families, and you say to them, you know what, I'm going to help you drive. I'm going to help you do this. I'm going to help you that. And you come up with a plan. Every week on Tuesday, 8 o'clock, I'll be here. And you will be there. But when you show up, it's a zoo. What's going on? They're not home today. What happened? Right? These things that you planned for, but they didn't commit to. Right? And you may even perceive it as disrespect. Oh gosh, they're not respecting my time. We in America are very particular about that. When I tell Tony 8 o'clock, I mean 8 o'clock. If I'm running 2 minutes late, I'll send him a text. Tony, I'm running 2 minutes late. I'll buy your first coffee. It's on me. I'm 2 minutes late. Right? We do this in America. But in the Afghan sensibility, that's not the case. It's not perceived as disrespect if I show up late. Thank God I showed up. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the feeling, and it's not about disrespect. Right? Tonight's a thing we're going to have. Show up. And they may come an hour late, an hour and a half. It's not about disrespect. They have just a different relationship with time. A different relationship with time. And so I share this with you because it'll give you some insight into becoming more sensitive, right, to how people navigate and operate, right? When I was working in Afghanistan, I had to train Marines on the same sort of thing, building wells and schools. It's just a different relationship with time and a different relationship with commitments. Now, let's take the Afghan sensibility too. They have a framework that actually may be very curious to you, and actually the way we live here in America may be very curious to them. How is it your wife has guy friends? How is it you allow your kids to, talk back to you? How is it that you allow your kids to, do what they want? Why don't they listen to you? Or you can go on with this over and over and over again. So there's I would argue, a lot of differences. But what this requires of us is an actual conversation. And remember, not all Americans are the same. All of you have siblings. You are not like your brother and sister, yet you all come from the same roof. You were raised under the same roof. And so all Afghans aren't the same. So what that requires is a conversation. How do you like to do things? How do you understand this? Help me understand how you'd like to raise your kids. How do you raise your kids? How do you understand your religion? And that may be different from two brothers. My two parents are very different. And they both raised me. And I have two brothers, and they're very different from me. We laugh the same, but everything else is different. Right? So I share this with all of you. It's hard to say all Afghans are a certain way, and if I was talking to Afghans, I would say not all Americans are the certain way. You find some that have never left their hometowns. Right? And they think all Muslims are terrorists. But then you find some Americans that actually don't like to be in America. So they live in Thailand. And they come back every once in a while to go to a wedding. So not all Americans are the same. Right? So for example, let me give you a specific example as a translator. You know, as a translator, it was interesting because I'd be in Afghan villages with Americans and Afghan military. And Afghans would ask me, how come Eric is really, really, really smart? And how come Chad is really dumb? Well, what do you mean? Define smart, define dumb for me. Well, Eric learned our language. He speaks Farsi like us. He's curious about us. He eats with us. We like him. But Chad, he looks at us funny. He doesn't come close to us. We feel like he's judging us. Is he dumb? Where's he from? Is he an American? Yes, he's an American. He's just probably never seen people like you before. He's probably never left his hometown before. And some of the Afghans that you may be working with maybe have never left their little village before coming here. They may have never even seen a big city like Kabul before trying to get on that plane for the first time. My cousins that you saw in this video, they spoke English like you heard. They worked with Americans. Yet they never left Kabul. And when they went to Dallas, they're like, what is this world? And they speak English fluently. So it's not just about language, it's about exposure to something new. One of your friends or kids or nephews, maybe they've never been to New York City or San Francisco. And they go and they come back and you say, how was it? My gosh, I saw two guys holding hands in public, Mom. Oh my gosh, I saw people like I've heard languages like I'd never heard before, Mom. Right? Just in America. So all this to share that it requires conversation to get to know each other. It requires a sense of curiosity to get to know each other. Okay?
I'm going to do an American thing. No should.
No, oh yeah. It's late.
And
Michael has a question.
I do want to just ask you to share one more thing about that. And you may have covered this. I had to step out for a second. And I know the time is short, but you have a second film that you're working on about
Yes.
Ranch, New Mexico.
Yeah.
And I think we'd all be pretty interested in that project if you could share about that.
Oh, you're very kind. So I am very interested in understanding mental health in America right now. And I'm very interested actually in covering a story that I think is really important in this moment. And I'd like to make a film. I'm in the development process of making a film about Afghan veterans and American veterans that fought in the war in Afghanistan that are here, that are dealing with PTSD and moral injury. And I want to take them to a horse ranch in New Mexico because horses have a magical healing power to PTSD. This is something that's happening now, and I've talked to the horse ranch owner. His name's Rick. He runs this ranch with all former Special Forces veterans, and they help people that have served in Afghanistan and Iraq overcome their PTSD by exposing them to horses. And horses, if you spend time with horses, they're magical. They're really sensitive. They're really sensitive, and they're non-judgmental. When somebody has PTSD, the thing that they feel is shame and guilt for the thing that they experienced or the thing that they may not have done when they should have. Horses don't do that. So this horse ranch, which is called Horses for Heroes, is what I'm going to call this film, is the next project that I'm going to work on. And the reason why I'm going to New Mexico versus other places, there's 2 more horse ranches that I've learned about that do this, is because New Mexico resembles the landscape of Afghanistan. And horses are revealed in American culture through our cowboy culture. And they're also revered in Afghan culture. And so the landscape and this animal will bring these veterans that served in this war together to overcome their PTSD. And so this is the next project that I'll be directing. And if you know anybody organizations that have maybe, that want a partnership, or maybe contribute to this project via grant, I think it'll be a beautiful story of healing through being exposed to these magical creatures. So thank you for asking that question, Michael. Yeah.
And could we all thank Bakhtash? Or do we have, okay, Steve.
Based on that, I don't know if anybody's here from benevolence, but you need to be given information on how to apply for benevolence.
Benevolence?
How to apply. Okay. Okay,
Cool.
yeah. What's just suggested is this church has a fund. And there's an application process to get
Great.
a grant.
So what is your name, sir? Great. And so I want to take this opportunity to ask my Afghan fellows, colleagues, friends, if you have anything to share that I missed or would like to correct me, please, I always offer that. اگر شما چیزی گفتنی دارین، اگر ما چیز غلط گفتم لطفاً این وقت هیچ نفهمیدی گپای مرا؟ هیچ؟ صفر. شما نامتون چی است؟
فکر نمی‌کنم چیزی داشته باشه. اگه داشته باشم میگم. من فکر نمی‌کنم. من چون ایرانی ام، من افغانی نیستم.
خب درست است. خب.
زبان میفهمم ولی فکر نمی‌کنم چیزی داشته باشم که اضافه کنم.
اینا چیزی که من گفتم نه یک فرصت است براتون شما خب فهمیدی گپای مرا. اینا کدام چیز است که من غلط گفتم یا مثلا به جای گفتم که شما می‌خواید که مثلا اصلاح کنید؟
اینا باید بگم. من نمی‌تونم بگم که چیزی
میفهمیدم حرفاتون شاید خیلی حرف داشتم.
Okay, I simply asked them if there was something that I've shared that they would like to add or maybe even correct. Because the things that we talk, I mean, it's very important to get different perspectives. So, unfortunately, they didn't understand what I had to say.
I would have loved the English would be a little bit better to understand everything you were saying, and it wasn't a place for me to translate.
I understand.
So, if I would have known, I would have said way in the back.
To translate.
To just hear you, I can translate for them to see what you're saying.
I see.
But that just exposure more than anything else.
Mazarat Mikham, I'm so sorry. Fantastic. So the key message is exposure. This is a different type of Afghan maybe that you're exposed to now. Go for me. خوب است دیگه.
اما کلیات مطلب گرفتیم سوالایی که حساب پاسخ کردن شما جواب دادین صحبتایی که کردین و من خیلی جالب بود. من یک نکته دارم. این موقعی که یکی از دوست سوال کردم که سوال اول بود که ما چطور می‌تونیم از اینا کمک شویم. من می‌خوام این جمع شما باشم که یک قدردانی.
اوکی.
تشکر بسیار ویژه کسایی در این جمع هستن. کسایی هستن که وقتی ما با همه ممکنه کسایی در این جمع داشته باشه که اینا هم در ما قسم برای پناهنده ها کمک کرده باشه. شخصا برای ما دوست بسیار خوبی من وقتی که ما آمدیم اینجا یک مسئله ما داریم افغانی دوست از آسمان کنده و پایین
درست است.
ما یک همچین حالتی بودیم.
اوکی.
هیچ چیزی برای چی میشه؟ آینده ما ولی کسای مهربان اینجا بودیم دست ما رو گرفت.
اجازه است که برشان بگویم با خاطر که اوکی اجازه است. نامتون چی است؟ حلیمه. حلیمه. اوکی. اوکی. فهمیدم. So our two friends here, Halima and Salima, they're cousins, and what they wanted to share was, quite simply, that they are very grateful for this community for welcoming them here. Even though they were prominent people, let's say in Afghanistan, they came here with nothing and they didn't know what the future was going to hold for them here. And the message that was given to you is, thank you for being here and accepting them in the ways that you have. Good friends like Terry and Joe Darvish, yes. Joe. The way that you two have accepted him is actually quite beautiful. And that's what they're actually saying is thank you for welcoming them in that way. Drostas? Maggie?
Margie.
Oh, Margie. And Terry's wife, Margie, which is right here. That's right. Huh. أها. مختلف. Yeah. And what she's saying now is something really, really nice. She's saying that you as Americans have opened her eyes in terms of what America can offer, in terms of the people that it has, how nice you are, how helpful you are to her in this experience.
And the thing, listening to her, what she said here, is when I met him the first time, even though I speak Farsi and I've been talking with them when I started, I cannot describe how fearful they were, how scared they were. You grabbed them, as you said. The taxi came in, your mom said, you need to go. You said goodbye to this one, you said goodbye to that one, and you leave. They said the same way. They just picked up and left. And when they came here, there was such a fear in them that what is the Americans are going to do? What are they going to do to us? Why are we going to this country that we don't know what they are? They would have rather go to Turkmenistan or one of those countries on north of Afghanistan than coming here, because that was much more known to them. But when they came here and they saw people, other people approach them, how helpful they were, how kind they were, I think that fear just set. And that is completely gone. And anything that I say to them or I work with them, they completely trust me. Because I think maybe in the culture, Iranian culture was that way, maybe Afghanistan culture was. Sometimes whoever that does something, there's a motive behind it. There's something that's not quite right. You know, it's like I say, sometimes people, when they shake their hands, you need to count your fingers to see. That trust is very important to them, and they don't trust that many people. I don't know how your parents learn the culture, but when they come here, they learn how good, how kind, how giving, how helpful Americans are. And that is just for them and for kids. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Lovely. And one other thing, thank you for saying that, Joe. One other thing is, I've heard this before and somebody said this, what can we do if we don't know the language and they don't know our language? Right? You may be thinking this. Many things can be communicated without speaking. And how do I know this and how do you know this? Well, have you ever gone to a place and you didn't know people and you were sad? Or you saw somebody that was sad? And they came up to you as you were sad and they simply asked you, are you okay? Whether it's in Ethiopia, Ecuador, France, there's something beautiful about human engagement. And I think that's all that matters. So you can go to family homes and simply say, how are you? Gestures with your hands, looking at people, simple touches make all the difference. And so maybe this is an opportunity for all of us to learn how to communicate in different ways. Right? Anyway, so I want to just leave you with that.
I'll just say that these two ladies I got to know through their children, through their teachers. And their teachers wanted to find out, what are these families? My goodness, what kind of families do these wonderful children come from? And your children are beautiful, and they have a desire to learn and a desire to, and teachers want to know, why are these kids so, what was the word? Curious.
Curious.
Yeah. We have curious children in this family.
That's right.
One last comment here, Vicki.
And this is something common that we all have. The fear of the unknown is the same no matter who you are. If you're going someplace you don't know, even into a local agency or trying something new, being a chair of a board in church that you've never done before, until you get able to do it and encouragement to do it, and you find out you can do it.
That's right. That's right. Good. Thank you, Vicki. Very good.
And with that, I think we need to call it time. And thank you all for coming. And look forward to seeing you around again. We'll have more Afghan events. The next one, we're for sure going to celebrate Nowruz. Nowruz, Amisol Dega Meli. Yeah. Oh, okay. Nowruz is the Afghan celebration of New Year's, first day of spring, March 21st.